if someone is dealing with a high conflict partner, that it's going to turn into one of those bad cases, a high conflict divorce. And she said that is absolutely not true. Because if you have two lawyers that can work together, a good lawyer can completely prevent this from happening.
You've entered Legal Owl, where sharp legal minds meet the power of strategic intuitive intelligence and inner awareness. Hosted by someone that is a veteran, an author, and is an individual experienced in specialist security operations, strategic intuitive intelligence, and transformational psychology, this is not your typical legal podcast. We explore what most lawyers never say out loud: burnout, grief, inner dissonance, and what it really takes to sustain a legal career with clarity, purpose, and personal alignment. Alongside powerful solo insights, you'll hear thought-provoking conversations with members of the Help Lawyer Network, lawyers, legal support professionals, and expert witnesses, sharing real stories from the front lines. This is the space where law meets what's rarely talked about. Welcome to Legal Owl, where wisdom meets the law and strategic intuitive intelligence guides the way.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is John here. This is the Legal Owl, and this episode today, I'm very excited to speak with my guest who deals with divorce attorneys, family lawyers. And this episode is kind of different because we're talking more about the existential crisis that happens in divorce and how it affects not only families and people going through it, but also lawyers. My guest today is a wonderful person, Lisa from Being There, Got Out, as you can see in the screen. Lisa, how are you doing? Welcome to the Legal Owl, or Legal Owl.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for hosting me, John.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm really excited to talk about your work because it's unusual. You're not a lawyer, but you've changed the law in many respects, and so which is really exciting. You run an organization, Being There, Got Out. You've got a book. You've got a new book coming out. We're going to talk all about that as well. But I want to go back a little bit. Before we go into how you got into this particular work, let's talk a little bit of what you went through that was the catalyst to you being the catalyst for change in the legal industry.
Yeah, never planned it, never dreamt of being a high conflict divorce strategist and changing laws. But I was in a relationship, a marriage for nearly 20 years with my ex. We didn't really fight. And I thought that, of course, things weren't perfect, but that things were pretty good. And then in 2013, I basically discovered that he had been living a double life the entire time and took 2 years to really plan what I thought would be a safe and effective exit. And then once I started the divorce process and finally talked to an attorney, within 20 minutes, the attorney said, "Yours is going to be one of the really bad ones." And I was astonished because I thought it was going to be amicable. We had already agreed. I'd taken all this time. And later, when I was writing the book, I asked my attorney, "How did you know?" And but he was right. And it did take a year. And instead of costing what I was terrified was $10,000, it cost $100,000, which I always say I'm going to be paying back forever. And it basically also cost about 10 years in court, because at the end of that year, just before we settled, my lawyer said, "Your ex is not going to comply with this agreement and you cannot afford me anymore. You're going to have to go pro se or represent yourself. I'll be in the background. But if you use me, or probably most lawyers, he's going to financially decimate you." So that was the beginning of my journey as a pro se, or self-represented litigant. And I spent about a year and 9 months really building my case before I filed again. And at the end of 2017, and it took a year to get the first big set of orders post-judgment.
That's absolutely fascinating that you ended up, representing yourself, because most people would absolutely be terrified at going through that, especially when you've been dealing with a lawyer. There's something that you mentioned that I want to jump back, because you said at the moment when your lawyer had turned around and said to you, "This is going to be one of the worst cases," How did that make you feel at that moment?
Shocked. I thought he has to be wrong. Why? I mean, I always thought that my ex had been a good person who had done some bad things. And I thought that he would remain a good person. I thought that he would remain an involved parent. It was completely the opposite. So, but my lawyer was absolutely right. And later when I interviewed for the book, and, I don't know if you want to get into that now, but we came up with a
I do
list
want
of
to get in, not now, but I do want to get into this.
yeah,
Absolutely.
of like a few factors of indicators of high conflict divorce that I now realize my case involved, because I had no idea what I was dealing with at the time. Again, I thought he was a good person who had done some bad things. I didn't understand domestic violence. I didn't understand personality disorders. It was only later that I realized, and 1 in 2 people in abusive relationships have no idea what's going on.
No, they
It's a
don't actually. You
staggering
mentioned that
statistic.
your ex-partner led a double life in. Oh, I don't want to go into that in totally, but was that an official double life, as in he worked for the security services in some way,
No,
or he had just another life going on with someone else?
well, it wasn't with someone else. It was his, like, a whole other identity. I mean, basically, he had been having affairs the entire marriage. He had been soliciting women during our honeymoon. I
Wow.
found records of things the entire time. So he had been doing what I learned was called lying by omission, and he claimed it was compartmentalizing. So in his life with me and our children, it was like it was one way, but then he had this whole other thing going
Mm.
on online where he saw himself as this kind of misunderstood, little bit of a misfit, and always needed to kind of be in the space where you're at the beginning of a relationship and it's kind of fantasy and magical and you feel really desired. And so that continued. I dozens. I don't even know how many
That's
times this
crazy.
happened. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're obviously some kind of legal warrior and have have fought your corner very well. I want to jump in a little bit of the lawyer. Do you think the lawyer who was representing you at first, and we'll go on and talk about the problems that lawyers face in these high conflict divorce cases, do you think he was out of his depth, or she was out of his depth, or they're not ready for this type of case?
Well, so keep in mind that high conflict divorce is a very small percentage of divorces. Like most divorces, everyone's upset at the beginning and angry and everything looks like high conflict, but the difference is that usually 4 to 6 months in, people are like, okay, these bills are out of control. We got to settle down and start moving forward with our lives and doing what's best for the kids. High conflict is the opposite. So my lawyer somehow, from whatever I told him, sensed that this was going to be very different, and understood that it was going to be difficult. I should say also that my lawyer, I think, was not a typical lawyer. He was a child of divorce. He told me about why he went into the profession of being a family lawyer.
Mm.
Um, and in some ways, it was to kind of right the wrongs of what he had experienced and to try to protect children. The other thing that I think made this case blow up was because my ex started with a very reasonable attorney, and he and my lawyer were working together. And as soon as his attorney started making progress, my ex fired him and hired the one lawyer that my lawyer said, I cannot work with this woman. She's impossible.
Wow.
She's notorious. And my lawyer got along with everybody. He had very high levels of social emotional intelligence. He was not a pit bull type, very non-aggressive, very cooperative. But this other lawyer, within 3 months, I'll never forget, because I was going to a funeral. My lawyer called me and he was like, not hysterical, but really scared. And he said, I'm so sorry, but our chances of trial just went up another 80% and it's going to get really bad. And I was just like, oh my God. And
You
he
know
was
what?
right.
You know what, Lisa? That shocks me, right? Because I'm then. What it begs a question is: could lawyers be the catalyst for high conflict divorce cases? Because And I want to get into how the lawyers operate, just as you've been discussing, because I see a lot of ego that comes into play. There's this whole element of I want to prove I'm right, and even if the other side realizes it's unfair, but it seems like to me from your experience, I want to reflect that back, that you recognized that the lawyers are causing probably more high conflict divorces unknowingly or knowingly. And what's the reason that they're doing this? Is it, do they have the best feeling or the best outlook for their client, or do you think there's an element of them that are like, well, this is just about my resume, this is about me getting another win?
So there's a number of reasons why these cases blow up. So first, I should say that my partner Chris has a good friend who's a divorce attorney down in Virginia. They were in college
And
together.
Chris will be on. It's another episode, by the way. You'll be meeting Chris at some
Oh
point.
yes. So Chris's friend, we were before we did our first book, we were talking to her about it, and we were under the assumption that if someone is dealing with a high conflict partner, that it's going to turn into one of those bad cases, a high conflict divorce. And she said that is absolutely not true, because if you have two lawyers that can work together, a good lawyer can completely prevent this from happening, depending on the level of whatever issue their client has. But if a lawyer, I think about being a classroom teacher, how classroom management was like 90% of the stuff.
Yes.
If you had to have your class under control so you can have an atmosphere for learning. So if you have a lawyer who cannot manage their client, then of course it's going to blow up. So Chris's friend said two lawyers that can work together can completely avoid this. And there's systems like in Maryland where they have built in collaborative practices that are very reasonably priced. So it's assumed if you're going into the divorce process, you're going to have a mental health professional involved. You're going to have lawyers who can work together. You're going to have mediation. They're going to do everything they can to keep the level of conflict low, because it also saves money and it saves families. So that's really important. Now, on the other hand, what we see often with high conflict personalities is they choose lawyers like themselves. I once interviewed a lawyer and said, because this comes up all the time with our clients, the question, why would somebody represent my ex? Can't they see what a bad person my ex is? Why would they participate in this? How can they sleep at night? So this one lawyer that I interviewed said, well, to be honest, those are the clients that pay our bills and keep our office afloat.
Right.
So there you have it. That's one reason. Another thing is, yes, there's lots of egos, but what I think about is something that a lawyer who's very famous in our community, his name is Bill Eddy. He's the founder of the High Conflict Institute. He now works with businesses and governments all over the world, but he used to be a social worker turned family lawyer, and he trains lawyers all over the world on how to reduce the level of conflict. And I'm so excited because he wrote the foreword to our book. And I just found out we're going to go to London and hopefully meet him in person.
Nice.
Where the book comes out. But anyway, Bill talks about this concept of positive and negative advocates. And I think that lawyers are sometimes negative advocates without maybe realizing that they are. So a positive advocate is anyone that associates, let's say, with a couple that's going through a divorce, that can be a little more neutral and figure out like what might help the family as a whole. A negative advocate does the opposite. It could be someone that loves and cares for you as a client, as a person, but they will fan the flames. Like, you deserve this. My divorce had this happen. You shouldn't let this person get away with it. Lots of blame and accusation, which ends up making things far worse in general, but especially with people who have a personality disorder and or an active addiction, who are more likely to be involved with a high conflict case. So that's why it's so important to have positive lawyers who can be a positive advocates and not contribute to those flames of conflict. And that's why Chris and I belong to something called the Amicable Divorce Network. We're the only high conflict professionals in it, but our goal is to meet others who can lower the conflict, because we know it just bleeds onto the kids, and that has so many ripple effects.
What about a lawyer's experience, Lisa? Because as you know, I work with a lot of attorneys that are potentially going through their own spiritual existential crisis. And obviously there's a lot of lawyers that are suffering through grief and other forms of crisis, and which is an aspect to divorce. And I know lawyers that have gone through their own divorces that are now family lawyers. And I think it's important for people out there that may be looking for a lawyer to try and identify, is it worth them finding out what the history of the lawyer is? Because a lawyer who's gone through a divorce might be easy, but they may also have their own high conflict divorce, which then makes them, as you say, could be that negative lawyer. So how do you kind of strike that balance, or how does somebody find out, is this lawyer for me based on what they've gone through?
That's a great question. We actually have a whole section in our first book that goes into how to choose not a good attorney, but the right attorney.
Let's get your book before we go in. Let's get your book up there. Show it. Have you got it in front of you?
Of course
So
I
here
do.
we go. Been there, got out.
Yes. It says Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances. So
phenomenal.
The person who wrote the foreword to this book, we did some collaborations. He's a Canadian lawyer, and his name is David Morneau, and he calls himself the recovering litigator. So he used to be one of those pit bull attorneys, and that's not me saying it. He said it.
He said it.
Yeah. And he acknowledges that he was a bit vicious in the courtroom and cared about winning. And then he had a case where a child was moved from one parent to another who was his, and later the child ended up committed suicide. And he really looked at that. I mean, that wasn't the only thing, but that was a big wake up call of what am I actually doing here?
Did that affect his mental health
in
a big way? Yeah, I would think so. Absolutely. He'd gone into his own crisis, obviously, from that.
Yeah. So we've done stuff in person, and we also have done interviews and collaborations. But in the chapter on how to choose the right attorney, we went deeply into not just questions to ask a prospective attorney, but what to expect from the relationship with an attorney, and also red flags.
I was just going to ask you to send me let me know what these red flags, well, not let me know. I mean, I've had a divorce myself, but it's, I want to go over these red flags as well at some point.
Okay. All right. But in the question section, my favorite question, so I don't think we need to delve into a lawyer's personal life. I think nobody wants to discuss their personal life with
obviously
clients. But one way that a client can determine if a lawyer might be good or bad for them is to ask them the question, how would you handle a case like mine? Because this has many layers to this question. You don't ask it at the very beginning when you first meet, but say talking after 20-ish minutes, how would you handle a case like mine? Number one, it gives you an opportunity to see how well the lawyer has actually paid attention to what you've said. Have they been actively listening? Are they able to express empathy rather than judgment towards what you're going through? And also, do they have experience with cases like yours? And then the second thing, or the fourth thing, is by saying, how would you handle a case like mine? You want to see that they can recognize the difference between these types of cases that need to be handled a lot more delicately and normal divorce. And they have to, well, if they answer the question, they have to tell you what their strategy is that is different. Because in my mind, for someone to ask the question like that is, we handle these differently because we need to keep the level of conflict low. And there's so many things we can do about that, rather than you just go in and start filing motions and then your ex is going to have to do this. Like, people on the other side, our clients' exes, get very defensive, like feral animals. And so when you start going after them aggressively, that's when the conflict explodes. So we want from the beginning, before you even file, if possible, how can we approach it with kindness? I know it's like disgusting to some people to think, why should I be kind to someone? But leading with empathy. This person is experiencing deep feelings of abandonment and grief and failure. So why would we throw fire on top of that? If we have children together and this is going to be a long-term relationship, even though you as a spouse are getting out of it, you still have to share children. So to have that long-term thought of like, okay, if I destroy them now, what's going to happen in the future, rather than it's might not feel palatable, but there's reasons why we need to keep the conflict low, because it's not just us, it's our children and future generations.
I think it's what you're saying is also, it's safe to say that the person who's gone through the divorce or the potential high conflict divorce needs to get a feeling that this lawyer can see the bigger picture.
Right.
Sees beyond the courtroom and
Yeah.
sees into what the potential future will be. So let's talk a little bit about these red flags, because people will want to know, even lawyers will want to know, what's the red flags? Because if you teach them red flags, then it may make them aware of, oh, wow, I'm like that. I need to back down, or I need to come to Lisa and Chris and get trained on how to deal with this. So let's talk a little bit about those red flags, Lisa.
Okay, so one of the big ones that I think about from the beginning with clients, and I'll get to the lawyer part in a second, is our clients are all involved in some type of domestic abuse, usually emotional abuse on top of whatever else. And so there's something called coercive control, where in the relationship there was an imbalance in the power, usually a pretty big imbalance, whether people realized it or not. And so our client has often tended to not have the power, and they get out of the relationship, which takes an inordinate amount of energy and time, and work with their brain and stuff. So it's very hard to even get out
And
of one of these
courage.
relationships. Yes. And logistics. So now they're out. They are completely lost, because it's almost like the person who's become an authority is gone, and there's many people cannot even figure out what to order from a menu. The most successful, brightest people, because of the way their brain has been affected and what they've lived with for however long. So now they are looking for somebody, and they are a vulnerable audience. If they're not careful, they're going to repeat the same cycle. We're going to say, okay, I'm going to pay a lawyer $30,000 or whatever amount of money, and now they're going to save my life, and they're going to take over, and I'm going to rely on them to do everything, and I don't have to pay attention, and it's going to feel so much better. That is not a healthy thing for a client in our situation. What we want to do is help them do what's called take strategic oversight of their case, and recognize that relationship with the lawyer is their first opportunity to start learning how to advocate for themselves. So one of the red flags, I'm finally answering the question, of a lawyer who is probably not the right fit is when a lawyer acts proprietary about the case and says, I'm going to handle everything. I'm going to tell you what you have to do, rather than giving the client options and making things very clear about what their choices are, and could they say yes? Could they say no?
So, Lisa, what other red flags are there that will show up in the behavior of the lawyer, or actually what the lawyer says? Should the person going through the potential high conflict divorce be aware of certain behaviors, be aware of certain inflections from the lawyer?
Yeah, I can give you actual words.
I want words.
Words like always and never.
And is this from your from your own case? No, this is okay.
No. So we work with attorneys. We interview attorneys all the time.
Right.
So we have lots of attorney colleagues, and that's how we learned from our attorney friends. So anyway, but words like always and never. So definitive language, big red flag. No lawyer should ever be promising, I can get you this, or this never happens, because we don't know, right? The law, I'm not a lawyer, but the law is pretty flexible. The only thing I've been told that could possibly be set is child support. But even for that, you need actual numbers for a calculation. So in our cases, a lot of our clients' exes play games with numbers, and they make them much lower when it comes to their own income. So it's hard to even set an amount. But any lawyer that is making promises to a client about what it's going to be or what the judge is going to do, no. We have had so many cases where clients have been led to believe that they're going to get custody, or this is going to happen, and then, or restraining orders, and then it's like, oh, I don't know what happened. The judge woke up in a bad mood. What? Okay, whether that's the case or not,
it doesn't
that
matter.
client shouldn't have expectations of this is how it's going to be. Okay, so that's the one thing we talked about, them being proprietary, being like, I'm the only one who's going to handle the case. I don't want you talking to other people. Like, certainly, yes, the lawyer, his job is to be your ally and advocate and translate the case into the law. And I understand not too many cooks in the kitchen, but when you are dealing with a client who's experiencing domestic violence, they need a therapist. They need probably a coach like us or a strategist, because
Yeah.
we make our clients less needy. We make them the teacher's pet. So lawyers say they like us because they're like, I don't have to babysit my client.
Right.
I don't have to
So
worry that
you're
they're going to be.
preparing them.
Yes.
You're basically getting them ready, giving them all the background
Yeah,
and the
so we call
intel
it
that they need.
the harsh New York reality check. We're like, we're going to go through the
I love
custody
that.
factors. We're going to go through the alienation factors. We're going to get you into teach you how to communicate better with your ex. We're not going to let you pop off because this is all going to be exhibit A. So all of that stuff, they have better clients who are easier to work with, who are less needy, because we know often how our clients use their lawyers. I did as therapists, because they don't know where else to turn. They don't know there's other
Right.
resources out there. So we don't want lawyers being like, you're I'm the one, like I'm the God and you only listen to me. We've seen lawyers scream at our clients, why don't you just do this? Those who have no understanding of what they're experiencing. So those
Do you
are
think
red
then that there
flags.
is a massive division between experience and theory?
I think there's a lot of marketing that goes on now.
Oh,
That
well,
says
yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, yeah, we're hit with it all the time. But I think though that. So here's my. Let me posit this to you. So here's my idea that a lawyer who has experience, has children, has maybe gone through a divorce. There's positives and negatives, obviously, right? But what about a lawyer who comes up that has no children, has never gone through anything really that's any kind of level of crisis in their life, maybe is young, don't have the, but they've passed the bar. They have done all, they're a family lawyer. They know the theory. Surely someone who's gone through a potential high conflict divorce should look toward the experience, and that the theory doesn't matter. Maybe there's a division between both.
I mean, I don't know if you have to be a member of the Been There Got Out club to be a good professional in the business.
Right? Fair,
I
yeah.
don't know. We like one of our lawyer that we really like, that we've had dinner with, is very young, and he has young he's having a baby now, but he has a very young child, so he hasn't experienced something like this. He's very happily married, but when he was 18, he was a referee, and he's excellent at conflict resolution, and he's super funny, and he also is
Wow.
a partner
Okay.
for his age. He's young, but he has a lot of excellent experience, and we have recommended to people to him, and they've been very happy with him.
And
So
even though, so it doesn't not always add up that you need to have that experience, that you can come from a place of theory.
right, yeah, I mean, you
But
need
he has
training,
but he has experience though, because you've just admitted that he does.
but he doesn't have personal
No, he
experience.
doesn't.
Yeah.
But he has lived experience in other ways that he's brought in.
Right. So just like anybody, the skills that you
Yeah.
bring for your life, and that's why saying, how would you handle a case like mine? Let's hear them give their strategy and skills and what their theory in terms of why they imagine they would handle it like this, which of course has to be more delicately, rather than we're just going to start filing a whole bunch of motions and your ex is going to be forced to comply. Like, that does not work with these
Let
cases.
me go to the polar opposite, play devil's advocate. What are the big red flags for lawyers for potential divorce, people going through high conflict divorce? So there's got to be red flags for them.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, some lawyers don't mind high conflict
Right?
clients, right? Because if they're paying the bill, it depends on the human being. But the lawyers we've talked to, when a client does not listen, they don't listen. They are proprietary themselves. They're like, I know better. Clients who listen to what's called barstool counsel, they'll say, oh, but my friend said I'm supposed to get this. Someone
Yeah.
who insists, like, let's say I was the primary parent, I know I'm supposed to get, this, and I should have this, and you need to do it for me, and if you don't do it, then I'm going to fire you. But I think So putting aside, and someone who's got a personality disorder and or an active addiction, that's a warning, that's a red flag, we say, for high conflict divorce for our clients as well. But I would say for an attorney, hearing it from the other side of the clients that make these cases difficult is someone who's been also a victim of domestic violence. So like our clients, they might be
Yeah.
difficult, not for the reason that you'd imagine.
Right.
So I thought it would be, just because again, it's like they're dealing with a difficult ex, but they themselves can be difficult. So we can be difficult because we have hope and we think my ex is not as bad as they are. Things might change. I'm going to take him or her back. We're going to keep working on it. So those are the cases that stall and stop and start and stop and start. So lawyers get like really frustrated with clients. They're like, come on, what are you going to do? Make a decision. That's hard to work with.
Yeah. I can
Clients who are
imagine
not
that.
honest. For us, for Chris and I, we ask, what's your biggest concern right now when we first meet with someone? When someone is going on and on and on about money, and then you find out they have kids, it's like, regarding the priorities.
It changes. I think what you're being clear on as well is the dynamic changes when you bring in children, because you talk about co-parenting and where this can be a particular stumbling block. And I believe you've got real experience from this, from your own case. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, my experience, I always say I got my best education in the trenches with my own case, but
Yeah.
my best experience is working with hundreds of men and women all over the world and learning from them. I
Right.
always say our content is inspired by our clients, because when they have issues, I'm like, ooh, I am going to find somebody who can answer that question if I
Right.
can't do it. And so, yeah, so that's what I usually do. But in terms of my own case, ask me a more specific question.
So in your own case, when you were getting into the problem of maybe custody with your kids, right? How did you cope with that? And because you didn't have a lawyer to help you, you were doing this on your own,
No, okay, so just to clarify, I had a lawyer for the divorce,
right?
but post judgment, I was pro se.
Right. Okay.
So for the divorce, we always say you need a lawyer because this is the foundation of the case.
Right.
However, what I did right at the beginning with my wonderful lawyer that, gave me all this information was
Yeah.
when we first met, again, he has very good social emotional skills. He is like way above many he does like men's retreats, he's done
Right.
the work, like he's not like a typical lawyer. But anyway, he said, let's try this. I want you to go to mediation and I want you to go without me. And I don't want your ex to even know that you have an attorney. So you hire me for a lot less money in a consulting basis. And
Okay.
now again, many clients are not able to do this. I was not afraid of my husband at the time.
Right.
So, but many people are. So my lawyer said, how about we do this? Like, let's come up with some ideas of what a parenting plan would look like, or the money would look like A and B. If you can get into that mediation, take it. C and D, I'm not sure. We're going to look at everything afterward. And E and F, like, forget it. We're not going. Then we'll have to go to court. But you're gonna, you try to do what you can in mediation. Do just like a couple of hours every other week, and let's see, because it's going to be a lot cheaper. And also, my ex didn't have an attorney at the time, so we had me playing dumb, which
Okay.
worked very, very well. And not having attorneys in mediation, which we also encourage our clients, depending on the situation, because, and good attorneys have said this, when attorneys are in the room, they're advocates for their clients, and it ends up being much more adversarial. Whereas if you
I can
have just
imagine that. Yeah.
yeah, the mediator or a collaborative professional who's working with the clients, like for my own situation, the mediator was an attorney who basically was the voice of the judge. Like, this is what a judge would do. So for example, my ex had been saying, I'm not paying any child support, like I'm not doing it. And so he went into mediation and said, well, I don't think that I should pay any child support unless I have a great relationship with the kids. Now, me saying that's not going to fly, he's not going to listen to me. But the mediator said, that's not going to fly in court at all. That's not how these things work.
Yeah.
So we need to come up with a number. So in a moment, that could have been thousands of dollars in
Yeah.
court. So the mediator was able to sort of like corral us
Right.
into making this thing, and my ex didn't feel like he was picking sides. So it wasn't like anyone on the defense. It was sort of like we were both in there being educated. And so we ended up, now my situation is also very different than a lot of our clients. My ex was not fighting for custody. He
Right.
wanted to say 50-50 for everything, but
Right.
he was like, you take he like dipped out. That my kids have a whole other set of issues.
Right.
My son actually said, I wish my father had waged a custody battle because it would have shown that he cared. My ex
Wow.
didn't do that. So custody, but I did get an awesome parenting plan with protective language in it that really was helpful. So, but just keep that in mind, like mine was different. But what did work was not having lawyers in the room,
Mm.
especially in those early stages, and then getting this great parenting plan that my lawyer said, "Oh my God, that is wonderful. You just saved." This was years ago. He's like, "You saved at least $10,000
Wow.
doing that yourself." In the process, I was empowering myself. I was able to deal with this person who had, you know,
I mean,
we had
let's
this.
face it, you did. You changed the law.
Well, that
I
was
mean,
later. That was later.
but if you hadn't have gone through all that, though, you would
Yeah,
never have been able to change that. So I
right.
mean, you're very much the divorce Erin Brockovich. Like you've come from nowhere. You've gone through this massive experience, and then you've changed the law later on, and with the work that you're doing and working, coaching clients that are going through high conflict divorce and these attorneys. I think I'm really interested as well in the work that you're doing with co-parenting, because I think that's really important, and perhaps there are lawyers that they've got kids and fine, and maybe like somebody they don't have kids, but they maybe, do you think sometimes the kids are forgotten about afterwards? Like they think about them during the divorce, they think about them when they're trying to do, but how they mentally are affected, what their crisis is continuing forward. I mean, just from what your son said, that's to me is brought out a big red flag. How do we look toward the kids' future?
Yeah, I mean, so to me that comes down to co-parenting communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a huge part of it. And I mean, that's whenever it's almost like after a funeral, everyone leaves, but you still have to deal with this person.
Yeah.
So, how do you do it? So now people are using AI a lot. I do not ever recommend that
Oh,
for
let's not go
working.
down that.
No, no. Especially with our clients' exes, it can actually trigger them because it's too
It does,
logical.
yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't
Absolutely.
really work. I mean, you can use it for little things, but so we teach something called strategic communication, and we say that's basically a system. We came up with our own little model called FRAC, FRAC, but it's
Oh, I
where
love that.
you are, thanks, you are writing to your ex, but you are always writing for the invisible audience. And the goal is, and this is the client is presenting as the best, most reasonable co-parent ever. But at the same time, they're documenting their ex's patterns of behavior over time, because for our clients, they're going to be back in court probably, the impact it has on their children and on their relationship with the children. So a lot of this also involves negotiation techniques and things we call in the FRAC, like the A, we call that the universal agreement or the anchor. And that's where you try to find commonality
Mm-hmm.
that you want to write down as if like we both want the same thing. So one of the most common universal agreements that we make sure our clients do, especially when the kids are being exposed to, poisonous messages about one parent by the other,
I
or
was going
one
to go into
blocking
that.
content.
Yeah.
Yes. Is to write to your ex, like, I'm sure, like, say something happens and they're freaking out and cursing at you during handovers or whatever, to say something like, this happened, like, I'm sure we can both agree how important it is to shield the kids from any conflict between us. Boom. Like your ex cannot say anything. I mean, they're going to
That's
say everything.
brilliant, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of coaching goes on. And I don't mean coaching in the way
Yeah.
that we're talking. I'm talking about coaching the kids, because they would say,
Oh, yeah.
your mom, your dad is this, they've done this, they've done this. So they're coaching the kids, and they're feeding them with negativity. And I think what you're doing is you're stopping that before it even happens.
Right. Or you're documenting it as it's happening and then you're whatever. So let's say like the kid comes, and this happens all the time. The kid comes to the house and says, "Oh, blah, blah, blah says you're this." A line like that, or something like another one we use frequently is, I'm sure we can both agree that the kids should be able to have a close relationship with each of us. Even though your ex doesn't feel that way,
Yeah.
they are not going to say that's not true. Or if they do, it's gold. Like one of our attorneys, Yoni Leveretz, his name is, in New York City, he said, their anger is your gold. So it's almost like you say these things and they're going to respond in three ways. One, they're going to stop doing the bad behavior, which is very rare, but it does work. Like we've had clients have tremendous success with trying to get things to go a certain way. The second is the silent treatment. So you write this, it's child focused. They say nothing. It's part of the written record. So now we start establishing the patterns of the behavior again, in terms of when you go back to court or asking for therapy or whatever. But the most common thing is they'll answer with this wall of angry text. It's because you're such a terrible parent. But by doing so, they're not actually focusing on protecting the kid from that conflict and recognizing one of the most important custody factors or best interest factors is that children, like each parent is supposed to support the child's relationship with the other parent, and nobody is supposed to, other parent is not supposed to undermine that relationship, because everyone knows that unless there's like crazy documented abuse and restraining orders, which is very rare, kids deserve to have an opportunity to have a relationship. And if it's not going to be a good relationship, then they need to figure that out for themselves, unless they're too little, and then we put protective stuff in place. But again, that has to be based on evidence. But that child needs to be able to have that relationship. It is not the same relationship as we had with our exes. And a therapist was just saying the other day when I was interviewing her, we have to remember it is a different relationship that child has. That's the child's one of their primary attachment figures. So for us to interfere and be like, I'm worried that they're going to do to you what they did to me. They might, but you can't do that. And that's what's really, really hard for clients to accept. And we have little props, like lots of barf bags and Academy Awards, of like, this is going to be very hard for you, but you have to understand just the nature of like human relationships, that you are harming your child by not following the parenting plan, by trying to restrict all the access. It's not going to happen in court, probably, because even people in jail have access to their children. It's about how do we teach our children how to advocate for themselves? How do we help them develop resilience and coping skills? Because it's not just going to be a parent that they're dealing with. They're going to go through the world learning how to deal with very difficult people. And you can't be the bubble wrap parent of making sure like they never experience discomfort.
They've got to experience life, and they've got to grow up, and, and they're going to get good and they're going to get bad. As simple as that. That's the way that the world works.
So a lot of that is almost like working with clients to realize like you cannot control these things, but what can you do to help, but not all this.
Do you ever come across, I think this is, it's kind of changing the song, but do you ever come across clients that just won't listen?
Oh yeah. I mean, often in the first call when we do a discovery Zoom meeting with them, Chris and I don't live together, so we'll text each other and be like, no.
Really?
And we'll say,
you both have red flags for potential clients.
Oh, yeah. So and sometimes we'll be like, this person's know-it-alls who are just like, I already have been communicating great and blah, blah, blah. Like, not coachable.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that know the theory, but don't have the experience to put it into practice. Or they'll say, but I know that. I know that. Yes, I know that. Well, yeah, you
I'm
might
like,
know
so why are we talking?
Why exactly? Why are you still going through the same problems?
Right.
Why are you not taking action on what you know?
Yeah.
Or what you think you know?
Right.
And what are you missing?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and everybody can learn these things. Many of our clients, probably, a huge percentage of our clients are mental health professionals. And they're beating themselves up.
A huge, hold the bus rewind.
And lawyers.
I was going to say, so a lot of your clients are actually mental health professionals that are going through high conflict divorce.
Yes.
Wow, that's a little, that is, I never even considered that, to be honest.
I mean, if you think about domestic violence, it affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men on average. And it's probably more than that because that's the reported stuff. So that affects everybody. I'm not saying that everybody has high conflict divorces or crazy custody
Yeah.
battles, but there's huge numbers of people dealing with who don't know what exactly they're dealing with. That they think, oh, this is just how it is, and I don't know, so mental health professionals, they end up really beating themselves up because they're like, I should have known, I should have been able to see this.
I get it. Well, at the end of the day, you can't really be a mental health professional unless you've actually experienced some mental health issues,
Right?
right? So it's like, man, know thyself. And, if you've got to work on yourself as you're going through. So, I mean, this is why we work in the mental health field, because we've had experiences.
Yeah.
And so you have to go through it. Like, I experiences of PTSD and stuff like that. So you have to, this is probably what goes on. I'm interested if you've dealt with any cases, Lisa, where it's a lawyer going through a high conflict divorce.
Oh, absolutely.
That must be unique, right? Especially if they're a divorce lawyer or any other kind of lawyer. But I guess maybe if they're a divorce lawyer and they're going through a high conflict divorce, that must be quite unique with you having to work with them, because they would have an element of the law. They know it, they understand it. And how do you cope with someone like that?
All right. So it's interesting because our lawyer clients sometimes feel the injustice the most because they're like,
Yeah.
I work in this system and I
Right.
cannot believe that this is happening. This is so crazy.
Yes.
This is like the Wild West. Like nothing makes sense. Nobody's like, this is not due process. Or like I'm thinking of one of our lawyer clients who had one of the most extreme cases of physical and emotional abuse. She was a graduate of Columbia Law School. She was a high-powered corporate attorney in Manhattan.
Wow.
She had a toddler and a baby, and she had gotten out of a relationship where she would go to work, she'd come back, he would lock her in the basement, covered up the windows, unscrewed the light bulbs, and they basically stayed in the basement, and we'd call her and the babies like the most vicious names. Then he'd let her out to go to work during the day, but in the basement, yes, with the babies.
That is crazy.
I know. So she had an attorney. So she didn't do divorce, but she was one of those people where she was so upset, and her training, she was a total type A, but she was a difficult client to work with because she didn't want to go pro se, but she wanted to manage everything.
Right.
And the injustice was eating her alive. So that was difficult. Things are she did really, really well in court. That was tricky though. But yeah, the lawyers, we also have lawyers who, like one of our clients who we've had for a while, she used to be a litigator. Her sister, a lot of times people with family members will kind of drag them to us over Zoom. Her sister was like, you got to talk to these people. I'll be on the call. So we got her as a client, and she was like, I couldn't believe that she was a lawyer and a litigator. She was just a shell. She was like, I think I can't work anymore because, he never picks up our child, and I have to always be there, and I have to be the hero. I have to make sure everything's okay if I'm working. And also he said that I'm a really bad communicator. So I don't think we were just like, oh my gosh. So she is way better now. She did not give up her job, and she ended up representing herself. She couldn't represent herself for a while, and she's had many victories. But to see, we've had a number of lawyers like go back to lawyering who could not do their job based on.
Does it change the way that they approach then their legal work from that experience?
I imagine so. We did have a client, I think, who slipped past us, who was a family lawyer, who we realized a couple sessions in, I think, was the problem. Because when we met this person, I'll say they, just in case. So we met this person. They were very like, I already know everything about all this stuff. I just need some help with the custody thing. They were telling us these stories about their ex, like throwing children on the ground, and I mean, like really extreme stories. And somehow, like, they were like, oh, it's going to be all worked out. And then that was like the first call, and then there was some time in between. And then all of a sudden, everything changed where this person lost custody and there was CPS involved and it was against the client. And I thought, oh, I actually think this person is the problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did you cope with that then? How did you
Carefully.
I was
Very
going to say,
carefully.
because the way that you approach that is a make or break, and you could cause more issues than. So how did you actually
That was a
deal with
very
the?
short relationship that we
Was
had.
it?
Yeah.
Did you disconnect?
We kind of were like, oh, this is really complicated, but part of this person's issue was thinking that they knew everything anyway, so they weren't reaching out as much, which worked in our favor. And we're just like, yeah, you got it,
Yeah. Okay.
you're an expert, like you're good at, like you're gonna figure this out. You have to work with
You're feeding
the
them what they need.
narcissism. Like,
Yes.
you're great, you're doing great, you're, I'm sure you got it, you don't want to waste more money on us.
Lisa, what is your greatest? If I can ask you this. What is the greatest case that you've ever worked on that got you the best result, but was probably maybe the most stressful?
Oh, that's hard, because first of all, my memory is awful. Like, I don't
So is
remember what I
mine.
did yesterday.
I go in the shower and forget to wash my hair. Actually, I come out of it and I'm like, did I wash my hair?
So we have, well, first of all, let me say, we have a thing every month in our newsletter called From Puddle to Ninja. That's our little hashtag. Like, because people meet us, they're a mess, and then they end
Puddle
up
and ninja, I love
transforming,
it.
and then they're like, rah, I'm getting this person. So we have so many incredible stories. Like, it's like I get a hit all the time and then I forget. And then I need the next hit.
You get a dopamine hit when it
Yeah, I
happens.
get tons of dopamine.
Yeah.
Tons, because we do so much writing back and forth with our clients. They're always reporting things. So
Yeah.
we have like the great stories. Like, we have like one of our clients. And when you say the hardest, I'm like, it's not the hard. Like, it's hard for me to say it's a hard case.
Yeah, I get that.
It's not. I mean, there's extreme situations, but I can't think of cases where it's been really hard, except when we were terrified for our client's safety, which is very rare. So
Right.
to me, those are the hard cases where I'm like, oh my God, like, what's going to happen? Or the false allegations where our client, like, it got slammed with stuff and they're just like, oh no, and they're behind the eight ball. Those are the hard cases. But the ones where we're like, we have control over what's happening, it never feels that hard. But one story that is one of my favorite, from one of our first clients. It's like, I've got that long-term memory. she was, I'll just say, so she was a Native American woman and a
Right.
special ed teacher in her 40s. She had bottles thrown at her face, like all the horrible, like, physical abuse, emotional abuse. She had gotten out, and she was a couple years out when we met. She first found us through our weekly legal abuse support group. And so she was in the group, then she hired us, but just for like a couple of sessions, because she already was getting a lot, I think, out of the group. And she was so smart, and she had all these skills from teaching that she didn't realize that she had. So her thing was, I wonder if I should go back and try to get the child support that this person her ex hadn't paid. And we were like, yeah, go pro se, like, you can do it. You're not in the middle of the divorce anymore. She was so savvy. She put together this great binder and exhibits and looked up stuff with the law, and we worked on things. She went in, the judge was completely impressed by her, said,
Wow.
Ms. blah, 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 give me your binder, I'm going to use it. And she went back a couple more times, was able to get restraining orders. Like, she crushed it. So she decided to go to law school.
No
And
way.
yes, and she
Really?
is
She
now
became
in
a
law
lawyer?
school. Yes. And so she is a, trauma-informed lawyer, and she is only one of 2% of lawyers in this country, in America, who are like her, like, Native American woman.
I would love to get connected with her and
well, we're
interview
still
her.
in touch with her. We
I would
we're
love
friends.
to
I met
interview
her in
her.
real life.
Wow.
I met her partner, and
Yeah.
she's lovely. She's very active in her community. We actually did a presentation for her community over Zoom for a Galentine's Day event like a year or two ago. It's like, yeah,
That's
so
phenomenal.
yeah.
That must be that's the one case where it's really blossomed and has been so.
Yeah. So that's like, extreme. But I think about one that happened recently. So we have an interesting situation where we have two ex-wives of the same person. We got ex-wife number 2 who referred us to ex-wife number 1, so we're tag teaming with the two. And so both of them are horrified. One has a baby, the other has a teenager. But both of them are like terrified of this man that they have this relationship with. And so both of them are puddles. So we're working with both puddles. One of them is also like a doctor, a mental health professional who's a doctor. And so we were working with her and having her do things that were counterintuitive, that we had to, say like, I just promise you, let's just try it. And it has worked. So this guy is coming after both of them. He was coming after ex-wife number 2 in court to try to flip custody. So she's dealing with all this litigation abuse, scared like, oh, if I'm not perfect, then he's going to do this and the baby, blah, 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 blah. But I remember just like 3 weeks ago, she sent an email, and what did it say? It was something like, I'm crying right now in the subject. And then she went on to say, you guys, like, I cannot believe it worked. He completely fell for this. And then and we always get screenshots of people's communication. She's like, look at this. And he's like, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate how your attitude has changed. And he totally dropped all the legal stuff and everything's great. And we have, we're checking her communication. But like, if you looked at the communication, you think these people are great friends and have the most amicable relationship. In the meantime, she faked it till she made it. But she's completely not scared of him. We're laughing about it now. And ex-wife number 1 is like, everything's good. And we're like planning how, I can't give details because it's still active.
No.
How to make this person feel like he's this amazing guy and wonderful father, and everyone wants to come to a party for him next year so we can take pictures of all of the exes and their children, and it's one big happy family. So that's again not like the hardest or the greatest, but that's the most recent that I can remember that we were just like, yes.
Wow, that's brilliant. I love hearing that, and how the what you're doing is helping to transform their lives, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
and also for their kids.
I was going to say that as well. A lot of it
involves like standing up to a bully and not letting that anxiety, letting your kids see how anxious you are about their other parents, but to be like, we're good, like we're fine, even if it's just on paper, because it changes you. And that's why I feel like strategic communication is one of the best ways to start healing, because you start turning that power dynamic around, and it's safe because it's in writing.
And you're using strategic language. Let me ask you that. Let's play a bit of a devil's advocate again, because what if you're in a case, Lisa, you and Chris are working on a case, and you both get to the point where you go, wait a minute, this is not, there's something not right here. And maybe it's the person who's the defense or the plaintiff, maybe not the people that have come to you that are going through the divorce, and you're like, well, wait, he or she that they're divorcing, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is not the way, this is not adding up. And actually this other side may have more rights, or maybe right.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because what you're talking about is all these people are going through these problems, you're helping them through, they're transforming, fabulous. Yeah. But then you come with someone that you know is maybe, intuitively going, yeah, something not right. They're lying. And maybe then you find out by the communication that the other party's right. How do you deal with that?
I love this question. No one has ever asked it.
Well, I'm gonna.
And I have to say that this comes up a lot, especially when people first meet us, and it comes out in the form of, unfortunately, like inadvertently alienating behaviors, right? Where the client is ours, and they're like, I don't want that person to see their other parent. I need to limit. Here's what I've done. And we're just like, harsh New York reality check. Like, listen, you are in the wrong. So, for example, we had a situation with one of our clients.
You're quite, I love that you do this New York reality check. I think it's brilliant.
So, for example, one of our people has 3 young children, and they were in a doctor's office, and like one kid was in the therapist, the other our client was doing an art project with, and her ex was in another part of the office with the young child. The young child started coming into the room where she was with the other child, and her ex-husband came and sat in the room, and there was nobody around, and she got very uncomfortable, and she said, you need to leave. Okay, so these two children who are there, like, why does
Wow.
our other parent need to leave? And she's like, you're making me uncomfortable. So she was having this conversation in front of the kids, said, you need to leave. He got very defensive and said, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why are you starting this? And she was like, so she was the leader. Oh, okay, so this happened. She got up and walked out and went in the parking lot, and the kids were crying and with her, and her ex was furious. And she said, how can I prevent this from happening again? And we carefully said, you need to apologize. You did completely the wrong thing. And here's why. Your anxiety came out, and your kids who didn't think there was no problem, but you made it about yourself, and it caused this problem. So instead, if you can't deal with that, then you never have to be in a situation where you're alone, where that can happen. But if I were you, I would send a strategic communication saying, I am so sorry about my behavior. I didn't realize it. I'm sure we can
How
both
does she
agree we
take
don't want
that?
to put the kids in the middle, and I was wrong. Like,
How
you
does
need
she
to
take that though, Lisa? How does
she
she take
said,
that?
she said, you know what? You're right. And
Well,
I didn't realize it. I mean, she took it well.
that's
We have
good.
to be careful,
Yeah.
because, but she took it well. And she said, I really appreciate you telling me that. I could see why. And we have to do that. I mean, that was one situation. We have to do that
Yeah.
fairly frequently with,
Wow.
and repeating it to a client where they're like, I need to have, all the custody, and he, especially women, because they tend to be the primary caretakers,
Yeah.
more so, not always,
Yeah.
but where they're like, well, I'm the one who's done everything, and this means that I should get this, and da, da, da. And we're just like, but that's not how it is. And we talk about the tender years doctrine and feminism, and how if like women, in the 70s started working, that everybody wants to
Yeah.
see more involvement, and that's just part of it. And that's why the states want shared parenting. And if you don't have evidence of like extreme amounts of abuse and stuff, like your child is still going to be having contact, whether even if it's supervised. So how do we work with that? You're not going to convince the court that person is cut out of their lives.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? Like, we have to figure it out, and we need to think about what it's like for your child. And so it's very, very hard, obviously, for victims of domestic violence who are just like, but this person just like broke my arm while I was holding my baby in front of my other kid. And
That's
like,
hard. Yeah.
like how am I supposed? So it's just like, okay, but we completely understand, lots of validation, like it's wrong, but we have to figure out a plan within this system, because this is the reality of it. So once they can kind of accept the reality of this is how it is, and we have to come up with a creative solution.
Right.
And that's where a lot of times our lawyers are like, you guys are great, because as lawyers, we're not trained in strategy, and you do something that we don't do. So how can we figure this out that might not necessarily be exactly what we want, but it's something we can live with, and it's something we can work on, and we can get some case management maybe, and some therapy, and other people to keep an eye, so it's not just you being terrified that you're by yourself. There's so many ways to play it. But yes, we definitely have people who are doing the wrong thing, and that's actually better. Just like
Right.
therapists say, it's good to be able to work with the problem parent, because then you can start fixing it.
Do you have? I don't mean to be negative anyway, but
No, please.
do you think you and Chris have any biases?
Everybody has biases.
And do you think your bias can influence what you're doing, or are you able to objectively just go, okay, I know I've got bias, I'm aware of it, I'm putting it aside?
I mean, we try, like a lot of times it's conscious. Like sometimes we'll meet someone and be like, oh, I totally, wow.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like
So you can be empathetic, but then
Oh,
you can be
yeah.
like, if they're in your shoes, or you've walked their mile, you could essentially, because I know in some of the work I do, I have to be very careful of my bias.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Very, very, very careful.
To me, it's more
Because
the
there's
story.
responsibility that you have. You're
Yeah.
taking everything that you're doing now, you and Chris together as a team. I mean, the responsibility is huge.
Yeah. So bias is interesting. So I think once they pass muster, because we screen all of our clients, then there are like we believe them unless, you know, certain things come up and it's like, ooh, that one slipped through.
Exactly. Right.
But besides that, we're like, we are on your side. We are going to support you. We are going to do everything we can. And then there's no bias. It's like, we're your advocate, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure you and the kids do as well as possible. So yeah, I don't think that bias comes into it at that point.
Right. So
Maybe
because
just
you've
at the
already
beginning when we
pre-screened
meet
them.
them and we're like,
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
But then once they start talking, the bias, I think, I mean, I don't want to not be self-aware, but it's like, it doesn't matter.
No, well,
anymore.
and that's why I'm challenging you, because I think that, you know, if you've pre-screened them,
yeah,
you don't think you've got bias.
right. So if bias, then I don't think bias
maybe the cases that they're one case that they're maybe on or you're on with them, and there's maybe Chris has got an experience that triggers him, and so maybe then that trigger becomes more of a bias where you're like, okay, the empathy goes beyond and goes into more of a even not aggressive role, that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, where that you get triggered, you could get triggered from your experiences, right? And then maybe
I generally don't. And you know what? And that's interesting. I'm glad you said that, because Chris he talks about this sometimes publicly, is going into this role. He thought he would be triggered a lot more, but I don't think either of us get triggered. No.
Right.
No, I mean, there's a lot of space and experience between, like, we don't really get affected. One thing that I think Chris, he's gotten a lot better is when people are traumatized, they talk really fast and they're all over the place. And sometimes he'll be like, this person is going to be impossible to work with. And again, we text each other. I'll be like, I got it. Or he'll be like, I am not writing a follow-up. And I'll be like, yes, you are. I'll handle them. I'll do it myself. And then it changes. So I feel like I tend to be more open, but certain people I'll be like, I don't like this person. I'll be like, no, give them a chance. But it's usually me being like, let's just see. They probably won't hire us anyway if they're that difficult. Like, let's just see.
Do you get any feelings? This is a field I obviously. Do you have any intuitive feelings like before you even connect with a potential client that this is going to be easy or this is going to be bad, or I don't feel like I could work with this person even
like
before
just
you meet
from
them?
Seeing their name on paper?
Yeah, just seeing their name, or even having a case history that comes to you, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's something not right about this. I don't think I can work with them.
Well, men on Friday afternoons often don't show up. That's what we found. If it's like Friday at 3 and it's a guy for the first time, he's not going to show up. We'll be like shocked.
So you know that. That's
we're already like, wow. Like if he shows up, then that's going to be our client. But no, not usually. No, I mean, we never know. I mean, that's the thing with biases. I'll be like, oh, like, or we'll see. Or like, I think sometimes our exes have like fake appointments. They'll have like these names that were like, that's a fake name. Like that's like big. Yeah.
So
very rarely.
So they test you out. They find out about you and they're like,
yeah. Or sometimes this was years ago.
Joe Smith.
Like we'd get like a thing. It was a message and it was like, And Chris's ex just last year was like, I didn't realize it was her, started commenting on my TikTok, which I don't usually go on. And I had no idea. And then I was like, oh, it was like a flurry. And this is like 10, 11 years later.
Wow.
Yeah, that was weird. But no, I don't think like I feel anything beforehand, but I feel it when we're meeting.
When you're connected with them, you're obviously
and that's the other thing is I need to feel sympathy, empathy. Sometimes when we're talking to someone and they're crying and I feel nothing, I'm like, no.
Right.
There's no transference, like something is wrong.
Right. That's interesting. Okay, I find that interesting that you'll pick that up. and
Yeah.
then you'll know, and there's no
It's
connection
rare
there.
because
Right.
everybody cry. Like they meet us, like most people are crying and they're apologizing. We always say you never need to apologize for
You
crying,
can
cursing.
identify a fake crying as well. You got
We've seen,
acting, a lot
yeah.
of acting.
Another thing, sometimes when people are like, I don't want to turn my camera on, not always, but it's always like, why not? Because
Yes.
I want to see your face.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you can read their behavior as well.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of stuff with body language. So I'm like, it makes me uncomfortable when people won't turn their
So
camera on.
before we kind of round up and get into how lawyers can work with you and how people can connect with you, let's talk a bit about your book and your new book, right? So, because you've all of this experience has culminated in you going, you know what, I'm going to write a book.
Yes.
How did that come about? And tell everybody a little bit about your book. Show it again so we can.
Okay,
show
so this
people.
was the first book, but there's another
because
one.
you've got a second book coming up, obviously.
Yeah, it's actually it's my third book coming out because my first book was about backpacking through Europe as a rite of passage, and I wrote that, and that came out in 2003.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, and it did really well. Lonely Planet was the publisher.
Right.
So, but this book, this book that came out in 2023, so 20 years after the first one, I started writing the book and then publishing, because the first book did so well that I was like, oh, I'm a second time author, I'm gonna do really great. And publishers were like, no, travel and divorce are totally different. You need to make yourself an expert. So that's when I started building our like social media up and taking my classroom into the bigger scene. So we started writing this book. It got put on the back burner, then it got on the front burner, then it came out. But then while we were doing some touring with this book in 2023, we went to the American Library Association conference with our publisher. And on the way to the airport in Chicago, leaving, I was like, or actually Chris says he came up with the idea, but somehow one of us in the car was like, oh, the next book is going to be about when your ex turns the kids against you, because that is so common, baked right into legal abuse, our specialty. So they're using the justice system and they're using the kids. We've talked about all the stuff with the justice system. Let's now focus on how they do it with the kids, why they do it, how they do it, what's beneath it, and then what you as the targeted parent can do, especially in and
I love that.
outside of court.
I don't want to go too deep into that because
I know we're going to be here for hours, and
that's another episode. But that's the one where you and Chris you come on and we'll talk about that with the new book. That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
actually to talk about, because I think that in itself was a minefield.
It is 22 million divorced parents in America and Canada alone are experiencing this. It is an epidemic.
That number's phenomenal.
Way bigger than high conflict divorce.
Wow.
Yes. And it is silent because, and I always mention this, think about, God forbid, if you had a child who died. You have the community rallying around you, supporting you. When you have a child that doesn't talk to you, what did you do wrong? Judgment, shame. You must be a terrible parent. And for women in particular, with the mother thing and the identity in this day and age, it's like, oh my gosh. So we have many brokenhearted parents dealing with this.
So let's talk a little bit about how people can work with you and how lawyers can work with you.
Oh, okay. So lawyers, if it's not already a client coming through their lawyer, a lawyer will reach out and say, let's talk and figure out ways to collaborate. So, our website is beenthere.out.com.
Which we'll link in the show notes and the books and everything else. Yeah, absolutely.
Lisa@beenthere.out.com, which is just write to me and we'll set up a time to meet if it's a lawyer. We also have times where a client will come on with their lawyer. They'll say, I want my lawyer to, then they're paying their lawyer and they're paying us, but I want my lawyer to understand, because we are like a team approach.
Right.
We have a client whose parent is a divorce attorney, and we all get together because the parent is not representing their child, but is very involved. We actually so we screened the client, and then the client was like, my parent wants to meet you because they want to know exactly what you do. So then we had another meeting, and I was like, okay, you have questions, like, what are they? And then at the end, the divorce attorney was like, no, this is going to be great. And we've had a great relationship working with the parent and child. who are both adults, obviously.
That's fantastic, Lisa. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, even though we had a little blip with the connections. I want to get you to come back on and obviously talk with you and Chris and talk about the next, the next stage, especially when kids, are used as weapons.
Yeah.
Essentially, are used as weapons.
They are. Yeah.
Let everybody know your website, your details, and how they can. I mean, you say they can email you, but you've got a big following as well on Instagram. And
yeah. So Instagram is at Been There Got Out with little underscores in between. We have a podcast called Been There Got Out. We have a YouTube channel, Been There Got Out. The next book is Been There Got Out, When Your Ex Turns the Kids Again. Everything just Been There Got Out, and you will find us. And it's just Chris and I, so we always answer.
I love that. I love that. Lisa, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for being a guest on Legal Owl. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a lawyer and you're dealing with high conflict divorce, or even the next case, if you've got cases here that people are struggling through this potential, what you've heard today, then please reach out to Lisa and Chris for that help. And of course, we don't just have lawyers that listen to us. We have, within the Help Lawyer Network, we have people that reach out that are looking for divorce attorneys and things. It's very important, ladies and gentlemen, that you know who to trust, use your intuition, learn about them, look at the experience. From what you've heard today, it should give you a really good insight at what you're potentially looking at. And we haven't even talked to Lisa about the laws that she changed. So she's got to come back. There's so much that we could cover on this. It's been fabulous. help-lawyer.com. You'll be able to connect with Lisa from our podcast, and everything will be linked below. Lisa, again, thank you for being with me on The Legal Owl. I can't wait to do more episodes with you and get more into the trenches and challenge you even more into
Yes,
things,
love it.
which is great. What's one final thing that I want you to give, just two final things, actually. One for a lawyer and one for someone going through high conflict divorce. One takeaway that they could change them from today.
You know what? I think it's going to be the same advice.
Great.
And I don't have my little button in front of me, but I used to teach high school English, and I have a little button that says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Ignorance
That's brilliant.
is what destroys us.
Yes,
So
that's true.
the takeaway is you can learn. A lot of this stuff is counterintuitive. It can feel really uncomfortable, but you can learn. You can learn strategic communication. You can learn to be a better lawyer for your clients. So
that's brilliant.
You can learn. That's the takeaway, is like it's not, change is not comfortable.
No, it's not.
But you can learn, and you should learn, because it has such deep impacts in your profession, in your life, for your children. Like, we want to stop intergenerational trauma. So you can learn for yourself.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Legal Owl, or Legal Owl. Please join us again. We have other guests coming up, and obviously we've got a lot more to discuss in the future. I'm looking forward to having Lisa and Chris back on so that we can talk about the next stage. And we'll put a link to the book. Buy the book if you haven't. The book will be transformational for you as well, and we'll give you some deep insights. I haven't read it because obviously I'm not going through high conflict divorce, but just talking to you and hearing about it, I can wholly stand behind it. And we'll promote this through Help Lawyer as well. Lisa, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure. I can't wait for the next conversation.
God bless.
You've been listening to The Legal Owl, where law meets the unseen layers of clarity, leadership, and inner alignment. If this sparks something in you, trust that feeling. Let it lead you. For deeper insights, real conversation, and strategic guidance, connect through the Help Lawyer Network and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you prefer a more private connection, you'll find the path when you're ready. Until next time, stay present, think deeper, and lead wiser.